Hi and welcome, Christine Sutherland here. And whether we're connected through LinkedIn, which is the most common way people find me, or you found your way here through some other means, welcome. I'm glad you made it, and I hope you find the material here as utterly incredible and fascinating as I do, even after all these years. I've been working on this concept for nearly 30 years, but it's really only in the last 20 years, with the benefit of advances in technology and research, that I've been able to crystallise and refine my thinking to develop this soundly evidence-based theory and practice of multisensory disruption of reconsolidation of conditioned responses as a relatively easy, fast and permanent therapeutic strategy. Thank heavens it's easier to apply than the lingo might suggest it is to understand. I should explain that I didn't want to make this into a schedule-only webinar that you could only watch at a certain time, because I think that's unfair to people who've got other commitments or who are challenged by being in different time zones. So I've made it into a view anytime webinar with an option to make comments or ask questions on the same page, because it's really important to me that you get every bit of value that's possible out of this. I hope that works for you, and I promise I'll respond as quickly as possible. I don't want to take up time talking about myself, and my bio is on LinkedIn in any case, so I'll just introduce myself as the CEO of the LifeWorks Group, which I founded in 1999 as a research and training organisation, and a peer-reviewed and published researcher who's been practising since 1994, on a mission to share some pretty cool stuff which we've been using and testing for nearly 20 years. Today's webinar is specifically about a better psychological approach to treating non-malignant chronic pain, which is not so much about managing the pain or helping the person to live with the pain, as it is about switching the darned pain off altogether. Because now, with an updated understanding of the nature of chronic pain, we can indeed switch off chronic pain signalling. So let's cut to the chase and look at why we need such a different approach, completely different to CBT and mindfulness, for example, and also different to strategies like EMDR or EFT. An important meta-analysis published in the journal Pain concluded that there was no treatment that helped the majority of chronic pain patients, and that included pharmaceuticals of all kinds, physical therapy, and CBT and other psychological strategies. I assure you this conclusion is shared by a great number of people working in the field of chronic pain and is entirely uncontroversial. Unfortunately, this represents a truly awful 3 million Australians, many more worldwide, approximately 1.5 billion people, who aren't getting relief and who are suffering badly on a daily basis. The human cost is the worst, of course, but the financial cost to the health system and the community is in the hundreds of billions annually. Now, I'm going to sprinkle some clinical evidence throughout this session today, and the first is our own pilot study from 2001. We'd been enjoying what we thought were pretty remarkable results with chronic pain, and we thought it'd be a good idea to put that to the test with a small group treatment project over just 2 days with a 2-year follow-up. In fact, we ended up running 2 of these, but the second had a 100% efficacy rate. So I just put that aside because, well, 100% just doesn't happen, does it? I didn't think it'd help our credibility to run with that one. So I just wrote up the lesser of the 2, and as you can see, it had an efficacy rate of plus 85% with a p-measure of less than 0.01. Over 60% of the group had complete remission of pain in 2 days. Another 25% had more than 50% decrease in pain, and the remainder had less than 50% decrease. The latter weren't counted in the efficacy rate. But that's just our little study. Other researchers are doing exciting stuff too, as you'll shortly see. So how do chronic pain patients show up in our practices? For a start, they might not come along because of pain. It's more likely they've come for some other reason altogether, one of the comorbidities associated with pain or something altogether unrelated. When you consider that 1 in 5 people suffer from chronic pain, the prevalence in our practices is probably through the roof. The person may or may not appear to be distressed, might or might not have trauma, might have difficulty verbalising what's wrong, might not be at all obvious that they're in great physical discomfort. However, when they're specifically asked for somatic sensations, they often report quite strong ones. You might even be well aware yourself that when people are experiencing a strong emotional response, it can include strong physical sensations too, even painful ones. So, how do these strong physical responses arise? Most people would have no problem describing them as conditioned responses, and in fact, that's exactly what they are. What we as a scientific community have been slow to realise is that this is also the mechanism which produces most, not all, non-malignant chronic pain. Pavlov showed us over 100 years ago that pretty much any stimulus can become a conditioned stimulus, producing almost any response. If we want to take a look at how crazy or weird this can get, consider the case of a smoker. Most of us are well aware that someone can be triggered into a desire to smoke by smelling cigarette smoke, or by having a beer or a coffee, or feeling stressed or anxious. But it's also quite common to suddenly get a desire to smoke when opening a newspaper, but not a book, when sitting in one particular chair, but not another, when walking through one door, but not another. Basically, anything that happens repetitively with anything else, or that happens with enough impact in the case of a one-off trauma, can become a conditioned stimulus. To extrapolate this to chronic pain, literally anything that occurs at the same time as the pain can become a conditioned stimulus for the pain. Now, of course, this doesn't happen for most people. Although chronic pain almost always develops from an injury, surgery, disease or trauma, the overwhelming majority of people go through an acute pain stage, followed by optimal healing of the tissue or organ, followed by return to as normal function as recovery allows, and typically no more pain. But a small percentage of people, or perhaps you might consider it to be large, it's probably more than 30%, don't follow this process. Although they experience optimal healing, the pain doesn't dissipate. In fact, it can become more intense over time, as in hyperalgesia. It can consist of grossly exaggerated responses to normal sensations, as in allodynia, or can spread or generalise not only as pain in other areas, but all kinds of other physical symptoms, including heat, actual inflammation and swelling, even in just one side of the body, or in one limb, or one hand, or one foot. The seemingly bizarre representations of fibromyalgia represent an excellent example of complex chronic pain that can exhibit all of those symptoms and, of course, is usually accompanied by deeply entrenched comorbidities. Here is why chronic pain frequently doesn't respond to pharmaceuticals or physical therapy or standard psychological practice. The fact is, it's frequently no longer nociceptive in nature. The pain and other symptoms are no longer generated by the injury site, but by conditioned activity in the brain and nervous system. This is why sham surgery for chronic pain gets the same outcomes as actual surgery. This is why there is precisely zero correlation between MRI or X-ray and the existence of chronic pain. This is so well known and so well accepted that MRI and X-ray are no longer indicated for chronic pain except to preclude issues such as tumour. Functional MRI shows unequivocally that chronic pain is associated with conditioned activity, primarily, of course, in the amygdala region, exactly the same way that anxiety or anger are triggered. Hundreds of studies have revealed this, and it's no longer controversial. And remember, literally any stimulus can end up triggering pain signalling. No wonder people say all kinds of weird things can cause pain. It could be a change in humidity, a draft, or certain foods. And then in the chronic pain discussion groups, you see all kinds of crazy stuff, like foods to avoid if you have fibromyalgia. Whole quack industries spring up around idiosyncratic conditioned responses of a handful of people. Just to stress how massive this issue of conditioned signalling is, keep in mind that stimuli can be anything perceived by our five senses, whether real or imagined, and includes the thoughts or words that we say to ourselves or think or feel about ourselves, our meanings and metaphors that we apply to those things, and our beliefs. Any of those can become conditioned stimuli for any human response, including agonising pain. Now, I promise that we'll have an answer, and I'll get to that shortly, but to understand it, we first have to look more closely at this mechanism of the conditioned response. The conditioned response gets triggered really fast, around 0.02 seconds, way too fast to be aware of. But that response isn't stored anywhere in the brain. It actually has to be recreated every single time. Scientists call that recreation process reconsolidation. And it turns out the reconsolidation phase is the most important part when it comes to achieving extinction using MDR. Most people who've studied classical conditioning know that if we expose the subject to the conditioned stimulus but withhold the response, as several desensitization strategies attempt to do, we can get a gradual fade off until the response no longer occurs. This is inhibition, but it's slow, unreliable, and frequently not even possible in the case of chronic pain because even the slightest stimulus simply re-traumatizes the person. Working with this method takes time and huge discipline and frequently fails anyway. There is a much faster, easier, and more permanent way that is only now just becoming more widely appreciated, even though Pavlov inadvertently demonstrated it over 100 years ago. He called it failure of the response, but in fact, he'd just shown how to extinguish a response by messing around with it in a particular way. If only he or others had realised the significance, we would have changed the course of history over the last 100 years. It turns out that conditioned responses are not very robust at all. In fact, they're incredibly fragile because if we disrupt the reconsolidation phase with precision, we get extinction without effort. It's fast, often immediate, and it's permanent. It's not just me saying this. There are many researchers working on this very important area right now. And if you Google scholarly articles related to disruption of reconsolidation of conditioned responses, you'll see a wealth of really good, high-quality studies. I will note that almost all of them talk about pharmacological disruption, injecting some substance into the amygdala region of the brain while the response is taking place. They haven't yet realised that there is a very powerful, completely non-invasive way to achieve a far superior result. Now, let's look at MDR and how we achieve disruption of the reconsolidation phase. There are three things to get right with precision. First, we have to gain the knowledge and skill to appreciate the wide array of possibilities when we're seeking to identify the client's very unique conditioned stimuli. I've given a complete list of those earlier, but of course it takes some practice and guidance to excel at that. Then we have to be able to access the reconsolidation phase. We kind of cheat on this by using a trick to extend that phase out into minutes instead of 0.02 seconds. And we do that by using the client's cooperation to focus on something very specific along with their own idiosyncratic language that we've discovered around the conditioned response. Firstly, we must precisely disrupt the reconsolidation phase. If our multisensory attempt at disruption is too weak, It will do nothing. It must be at least as intense as the conditioned response, and our favourite way to achieve that is by physical stimulation, along with very different idiosyncratic language of the client that triggers a very different response to the unwanted one. When we work with chronic pain patients, we have to keep in mind a twin focus. We work with the stimuli that is directly associated with the pain response itself. An example of this is targeting the client's actual physical perceptions of the pain or the client's metaphors or beliefs around the pain. Here we're directly aiming to switch off pain signalling. The other focus is more general. We know, because researchers and pain specialists tell us so, that often in chronic pain there is a general central sensitization that many describe as being like a faulty car alarm. The whole system is in a kind of hyper-alert, hyper-aroused, overreactive state. So more than the general population, chronic pain patients need to pay attention to the whole gamut of things that could lead to a stress response or maintain a stress response, at least until they've solidly returned to normal functioning. This will be habits, lifestyle factors, and any comorbidities that are in play. We use MDR to switch off hyper-responses generally and help the nervous system get back to normal functioning. Of course, in addition to that, we may also need to engage in education and support, providing a solution focus on the issues we're helping with. MDR is, after all, a powerful adjunct to therapy, not a complete replacement for therapy. When people first learn MDR, unfortunately, they get caught up on the multisensory part, particularly if they've learned EFT or EMDR or some other type of physical stimulation. It absolutely doesn't matter what the multisensory stimulation is, and a monkey could learn to do it. It takes no skill whatsoever. It could be tapping, brushing, rubbing, pulling, tickling, or scratching. It could equally be stepping, hopping, dancing, skipping. It could be playing a musical instrument or playing sport. It absolutely doesn't matter as long as it's intense enough, without causing pain, of course. If someone has facial pain, I'm obviously not going to have them brushing or tapping on their face. If someone has allodynia on an arm, I'm going to miss that arm when I get them to do brushing movement on limbs, because obviously I want to disrupt reconsolidation, not solidify it. The skill part of MDR is in investigating and identifying, eliciting the array of conditioned stimuli at play, and in digging out the client's very idiosyncratic language or representations of their perceptions. This can be challenging to people who've studied EFT because there's a propensity to over-emotionalise or incorrectly emotionalise the client's experience and to impose constructs on them that are quite alien to their perceived experience. Obviously, that will produce only half-baked results, if any, which explains why EFT and EMDR are often so unreliable. Once we have that unique idiosyncratic language, we can very readily extend the reconsolidation phase by repetitively using that language, and reconsolidation is then accessible to disruption via sensory stimulation. At this point, we definitely aren't wanting to distract the client from their pain in any way, shape or form. We actually need them to really concentrate on the worst of it in order to get that reconsolidation phase up and active so that we can disrupt it. Here are some examples of what typical results look like. Sally, not her real name of course, was a 9-year-old who'd been in severe full body pain for many months. She wasn't able to attend school anymore, and every morning her parents had to lift her from her bed to get her to the toilet because she was so weak and in so much pain. She'd actually scream out and cry with pain, even at the touch of their hands on her skin, as gentle as they tried to be. They brought her to me in desperation because nothing had worked, and the next step was going to be following through on a booking they'd already made for a 2-week hospital stay to go on strong medication combined with group therapy using CBT. Sally came in with pain she said was 8 out of 10. She was in considerable distress. At the end of the session, she had no pain at all and reported a slight tingling in the very tips of her fingers that she put at a 2 out of 10 as a tingle. The next day, Sally went to school and went back to martial arts training. She never needed the hospital stay. Some of these guys were individual clients and 2 were on pilot studies. Male, 48, full body stiffness that he described as waking up every morning feeling like he was made out of concrete and shooting pain down his arms then and throughout the day. At 2-year follow-up, he reported no more pain at all, the end of being a human statue, and, as he said, just a bit of a soreness now and then, which for a fairly inactive 50-year-old could be considered fairly normal. Female with spina bifida, complaining of pain and weakness in her legs. She had a plus 50% improvement in both symptoms, but elected not to continue treatment. It's a really interesting thing about pain clients. See, they don't come to us because of the pain, not usually anyway. Otherwise, they wouldn't be sitting there telling us how they've suffered for 20 years. They come because they've reached a turning point where the pain gets bad enough to stop them from doing something that they give priority to, whether that's an activity they can't do, family time they can't enjoy, or a relationship that's strained to breaking point. When the pain goes below that level, unless you've got their commitment to go the distance with a comprehensive program, they often don't come back because in their mind they don't have enough reason or motivation to. Female with nerve damage in her cervical spine, no more pain at all. Female with back pain, supposedly due to severe disc degeneration. Doctor had told her next step was surgery. Her pain was 8 out of 10, even on medication. But she didn't come because of the pain. She came because she'd had to give up her job as a librarian. She loved her job, and she was sad she couldn't lift up her little granddaughter anymore. We quickly got her pain to sit at 2 to 3 without medication. She went back to work and reported she could lift her granddaughter with ease. I would have preferred her to get to 0 pain, but like I said, that was enough for her. Male with a lot of facial pain, including some severe shooting pain from one temple to his inner brow. He walked out with 0 pain. Another one I'll mention is a woman 46 with post-surgical pain from cancer surgery 6 months previously. She had pain along her jaw and down her neck and well into her shoulder. She also left with no pain at all and was so shocked she rang me a couple of hours later after a long drive home to tell me she still had no pain. So this is really incredible, exciting stuff, and more important for me than I can possibly describe to share this with you so that MDR can get out there and really help ease people's suffering. But there's another agenda that's also close to my heart, and that's eradicating quackery. I'll say a bit more about that to explain more why. In any case, really sorry, but we can't work with, support or endorse people who support discredited alternative therapies or products. We want to collaborate with other science-based professionals so that everyone can get more reliable and more predictable outcomes more quickly and more easily for more people. Now, please forgive me for getting on my soapbox. Make no mistake, people have extremely limited resources of time, energy and money, especially if they've suffered from chronic pain for some time. Quackery robs people of those resources and distracts from treatment that is actually proven to work. So it ends up delaying or denying the opportunity to be helped. And people even end up dying because of that. Parents inadvertently kill their children because of that. The harm is both monumental and tragic. And where that alternative therapy is insurance funded, it robs and endangers the health and well-being of the entire community. As professionals working at the coalface of human health, I believe we have a deep responsibility to actively strive to eliminate quackery from the health sector and ensure people have access to science-based, efficacious therapies. So here's our mission. It's twofold. First, to disseminate more effective evidence-based therapy strategies that eliminate suffering more quickly and more easily for more people. Secondly, to eliminate suffering caused so unnecessarily by quackery. And yes, there's a big picture vision for the future, because our mission won't succeed without it. It's our passionate goal to build a global, collegial association of highly effective science-based mental health professionals, some of whom will enjoy collaborating on research projects together and/or with us, who will provide and benefit from peer support, who want to continue exploring and using MDR with a whole range of issues and disorders, and whom we can be proud to refer to recommend and support as colleagues. Now, although this webinar is recorded for viewing at any time rather than scheduled, I really want you to get your questions answered and get any more detail that you want. So please use the comment section below to ask any questions or make any comments. I promise I'll respond as quickly as I can. Also, a complimentary copy of the full manual, The MDR Approach to Chronic Pain Treatment, is available in the online training program for psychologists. Or if you want to just dip your toes first, alternatively, an inexpensive introductory text, Frontiers in Chronic Pain, is also available. I'll give you the links to those shortly. Now, while I'd love to be a charity and simply give all this away, I'm in fact just like you and have mouths to feed too. So I've developed a personally supported online program for psychologists that is also ridiculously affordable. Honestly, my absolute priority is just get this material out there. In the program, you'll enjoy our support and the support of your peers to implement MDR into your practice as seamlessly and effectively as possible. It's backed up by weekly Q&A as well as limited telephone and email support. At some time in the future, you may want to consider closer supervision and even certification in MDR. You may or may not want to consider becoming a global associate, whom we directly refer clients to, provide educational marketing collateral and guidance, and strongly assist with practice development. We plan on giving you access to ongoing specialised programs at no extra cost at all. Frankly, we just want to give you everything we've got, because if we're to have the impact that our mission speaks to, it won't be I that achieves that. It's only the greater mass of the psychological community who can possibly achieve it. So go have a look at the links here. Make a choice of how you might like to engage and see for yourself whether it can be easily integrated into your clinic. I'll just be grateful that you've got the material and can share it amongst colleagues. It's all good. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart for being here and for hanging on to the end. Regardless of what you choose to do, I thank you for being of service to others, for caring and being open about potential for improvement, and for taking precious time out of your day to spend here. It means a lot. So go ahead, ask those questions, make those comments, and let's talk soon.